Welcome back to the eSpecial Needs Podcast. I'm your host, Mary Blanner. In Season 2 of the eSpecial Needs Podcast, we'll be addressing care for the whole person, focusing on early intervention and school-based care resources. We've noticed that it can be difficult to find relevant and researched information for all stages of life, so our next season is focused on that. Here at eSpecial Needs, we want you to be able to not only get the products you need for your loved ones, but also help answer some of the questions that you might have along the way. Whether you're a parent, teacher, caregiver, therapist, or sibling, we want you to be able to help you get the information that you need while you're on the go. For our podcast today, we wanted to present you with a brief mini-episode that provides you with tips and insights for parents and kiddos working from home and learning from home. Our guest for this episode is Mary Blanner. She has 8 children and is an old pro when it comes to homeschooling. She has a bachelor's degree in special education from the University of Missouri and is working on attaining her master's degree in special education from the same institution, along with a reading specialist certification. You might remember her from Season 1 of the eSpecial Needs podcast. She's also my mom. Without further ado, welcome Mary. All right, welcome to the eSpecial Needs Podcast. We're very excited to have you today. And so with the ongoing pandemic, there's one thing I really want to talk to you about. So you guys are all working and learning from home, correct?
That's correct.
So
every day.
Every day, sun up, sun down. How many kids do you have at home right now?
Currently, there are 6 studying at home, as well as myself, completing my capstone for graduate school.
And what's the age range?
20 to 8.
All right. So you've got a lot of kids in a lot of different grades.
College to 2nd grade. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So how's that going?
So it's going okay. And we use Zoom as software, Seesaw, and Google Classroom as the primary modalities that the students are submitting their work.
And what's like the good parts of the days for you guys? Like how's that going?
I'd say the good parts of the days are that everyone gets to be together. I had homeschooled from 2012 to 2016 at the time when we actually had 8 children all living under the same roof, and the children went to a different school. And thankfully, this was really a seamless transition for us. They just kind of picked up where we had left off. They even knew where to sit at the kitchen table and what time to begin. And the best part of that is that in this situation of school implemented e-learning, the teachers grade the work. And in the past, I was grading Latin work, but had no answer key, and I don't know Latin. And in this situation, the teachers accept assignments, and they try to have the kids turn everything in by 6 p.m. every day. And then if the struggle that is the greater struggle is that the teachers don't always know where they ask the children to submit their work. So then the kids are questioned about, did they complete it? Well, usually I've been sitting next to them submitting one assignment after another. And then the teachers create stress in the children because they're like, you didn't turn it in. And the kids are like, I did turn it in. You just can't find it. And so that's one of the downward parts. But one of the greater parts is that everybody gets to be together. We've already done this before. It's teacher facilitated instead of parent facilitated, parent implemented, but teacher facilitated in this case. And the frequency of recess, I would say, is probably the highlight.
For the little guys, yeah.
They make up recess and snack time, so it's fine.
So let's kind of talk about what the tips you have, because this is not your first rodeo with homeschooling, right?
Correct.
So for parents who it is their first rodeo for homeschooling, what's like something that you would recommend for them?
I would recommend just doing things in chunks, and you can't get it all done at one time. And when your child says it's time for recess, well, obviously they've kind of had enough. You can't do everything all at one length or one stride as though you were at in the regular classroom. Um, for a second grader, they would work in my child's experience from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. and then have recess at 10 a.m. Well, I can honestly say that my second grader has no interest in working for 2 straight hours at the kitchen table. He wants to go outside. So he won't usually start at 8 a.m. He'll usually start at 9 a.m. And by 10 a.m., he wants to have recess. And so I'll push him a little further, maybe to 10:20, and then he goes to play outside. And then we round him back up again and start again. You just can't do everything the same way,
Yeah, so it sounds like breaks are good. Breaks are important.
Breaks are important, breaks are good. And I guess in my situation, there's a number of people who are asking for help. And so I would imagine that's the case for many parents who haven't been as well trained in education as I have been. And so, you know, as much as children have different learning styles, parents have different learning styles. So you're dealing with, in my situation, a fifth grader who there's no way she's going to just read things and answer questions and submit through Google Classroom. You have to really um, address differentiation in her experience. So then you've got one outside playing in the backyard, quote, recess time. Then you've got another one next to you working on another thing. I mean, it's a little demanding, but I
Yeah.
think, recognizing those differences between each child and the difference between your own capacities is significant.
So how do you balance that attention?
I make sure that nothing else is being accomplished until the schoolwork is accomplished, and whether that's one person lining, sometimes they'll all line up and say I finished everything, and then I'll say, okay, well, we have to check it. I have to make sure you turned everything in because the teacher will question where are the assignments. And how do I balance the attention? So if one is waiting for their things to be checked or one is stuck on something, they just have to take turns.
Yeah.
And they have to wait, or somebody's going to have to work on something that's less difficult, move on to a different area of subject, or do something like color, or play a game or work on a reading activity on their iPad, or just you just have to diversify it like you would in a classroom. You have to look around and see what everybody needs and focus on the one thing that at that moment demands the most attention or the most energy.
You've really got like a one-room schoolhouse, like Little House on the Prairie style.
It happens.
It does. It does happen. So how are you balancing your schoolwork and their schoolwork? How is that working out?
It's very challenging because I'm in the process of a research methodology course, which required a research study of children in the classroom. And my scope of my research was on learning styles and differentiation. And so essentially, I'm doing it in my own home. However, that is not my participant group. So
Oh, so you got a
I
double dip.
yes, I've had to adjust my own research study for the seventh grade at the school my children attend. And it has, so differentiation, and all we're doing is online learning, not an easy task.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah. So how have I balanced it? I'm doing the best I can. I can't say I'm killing it. It won't be an A on my transcript like all the other grades, but if I can pass it, I'll be thankful for that. And if anybody ever asks me for my transcript when I pursue a position in education and they say, why is this grade not like all the other A's? Then I'll just respond, pandemic. And I think there's going to be a level of understanding that just will exist in our culture. I think there will be that as a point of reference, a point of commentary. And I think it will ensue until even my second grader is old, and it will become a point of reference. What were you doing during that time? What were you doing? Where did you live? How did you go to school? Where did you go to school? What was the hardest part? I think it's something that will characterize this generation and the culture for decades ahead. That's my
Yeah.
guess.
I mean, I can completely understand that perspective.
Yeah.
It's very merited. So what's been a challenging thing, particularly about this quarantine pandemic for the Blanner family?
Uh, well, the interesting thing to note is that I've been home working on my schooling since 2018, and I've been doing this semester after semester after semester. And all of a sudden, everyone has come into my workspace. Yet they all have
Oh.
opinions and responses and territories and time frames and schedules and independent variables that are impacting the overall good. And so I would say that's the biggest challenge, is that not only am I trying to accomplish my own work that I've been pursuing for 3 years, and I'm in the home stretch, I'm in the capstone. There's only one capstone.
Hmm.
Um, then you have the dynamic of a husband working from home, and I've put an office up in our bedroom, and so the children know they can't cross into that area, just with unbridled energy. They know they have to knock on the door before they enter. So that's in place. That helps. Um,
Yeah, definitely having designated workspaces.
well, and just they already know they can't go bounding into my bedroom.
Hmm.
And then I think, just patience, tolerance, um, flexibility. I would say those are, those are keystones to a large family. However,
They're just like amplified.
yes, when you add the dynamic and the pressures of academics and schedules um, and the dynamics of my husband's clients, you've added a whole different layer.
Hmm. Yeah, but it
And
sounds
food,
like
they just keep.
yeah, I mean with 6 kids, many of whom are teenagers, it's
Hmm.
going to be difficult.
Hmm.
Um, so what about kiddos that learn different, because like for kiddos that have special needs or disabilities, um, and from your experience, not only as a parent, but also from your education, what are some things you would recommend?
I think just the consistency and giving everyone their own quiet space, their own sense of self. And whenever you can tap into that. So say, for example, you have a child with autism. I mean, they do not, they need that repetition. They need the consistency. Well, all of a sudden, you've pulled that away. You've pulled away the school bus. You've pulled away their lunchtime at school. You've pulled away their consistent teacher. It's difficult for people who are flexible. Add into this equation the necessities of a child who has special needs. I mean, that's really, really intense, not only for the parent, but for the child as well. And I think
Hmm.
if you can just really tap into what feeds them, what language essentially that best works with them, I think that's when you have better keys to success. I don't think for anyone this is going to be a 100% success system. I don't
Yeah,
think it's possible.
I mean, it sounds like you're kind of I know we've like you're my mom and we've been talking about this, but I feel like oftentimes it's hard to be patient with this kind of thing, and it's kind of annoying, right? um
It's not that annoying.
I mean, I'm kind of annoyed by a pandemic. I feel like a lot of people
I
are.
think it's limiting. I don't know if it's annoying. It's limiting, and people feel frustration from limits. But I mean, I think that when you can, essentially set a tone for reflexivity and response and pliability. If you can set that tone and you can make one small thing a big deal. Oh, hey, we're going to use chalk in the driveway today, or hey, we're going to have bike races down to the circle and back, or today we're going to go on a running path at the high school whose track and field are still unlocked. I mean, anything that you can do to kind of elevate it, where there's some kind of I guess by the end of the day you look it back and you say, oh, well, that was the big reward of the day. And I think when you're able to do that, you've succeeded. Even in the case of, for a child with special needs, if they have one particular preferred reward system of some sort that they're using at school, and you can have that continuity that you're putting in place at home. All parents obviously would know that based on their child's IEP. Really, dig deep in your desk or in your email files and read that IEP again and see what's really working in the classroom and translate it in some way to your home. It cannot be easy.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So from this conversation, it sounds like the most important things that you have recommended have largely been tips about routine,
Yeah.
knowing your kid's pace and going at their pace,
Mm-hmm.
um, finding good and proper workspaces and having those be the workspaces, like whether it's the kitchen table or dad's desk in the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
Those things are important. Those boundaries are important.
Yes.
Um, and then making sure physical activity is encouraged.
And I think modeling too, modeling for your spouse, for your children, modeling your response. They're going to take
Mhm.
their cues from you. You're the leader, essentially. The
Right.
teaching them is the leader. Model for them. Oh gosh, this is so frustrating. Your teacher can't find your assignment. And
Mhm.
I mean it upsets a child. Of course it would. They did the work, they turned it in, they want to go outside. Just really kind of setting the tone
Yeah, setting the tone is
of
important.
positivity and patience. And
Keeping a level head.
yes, there's no options here, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Those are the only
what
choices.
I've got a couple quarantine rules for myself, and one of them is that I can't complain at length about a pandemic because I think ultimately it's not a productive thing.
No.
And I think
Tire.
that, pardon me?
You're spending tireless energy on it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's exhausting.
And there's nothing that you can do to change it. So,
Nothing.
I
So
mean, the
you
best we can do is social
roll with it.
distance, try to help prevent and flatten the curve, pause the spread, wash your hands, only go out when it is completely necessary, those kinds of things. But that's like all we can do simply.
Enjoy the space you're in. Be where you're at. Be present. Be peaceful.
What about creativity? Like, how do you help encourage creativity while in quarantine? It
Mm,
doesn't have to be particularly productive creativity. It's just like, I think that is an important thing. And you have a minor or a major in art? Am I
minor, minor.
minor?
Yeah.
How do
I
you
think
encourage the
I
littles
mean,
to be
you
productive
can do
in that?
that. Like I was saying, like learning styles. What are the options? Visual, auditory, reading, interpersonal, intrapersonal, kinesthetic. You have all these options, but it feels like the only option is reading, listening to, and clicking submit for your child. That's what it feels like. And in doing this graduate research study, I've had to communicate how to identify Abraham Lincoln's beliefs that were changed in the 1860s election, but I have to use varied learning styles. However, my modalities are a computer. So that's very limiting. So what can
Mhm.
I do with that? What can I do? What are my options? Here's just the simplest example. So the students were given choices, and with your children, give them choices. Okay, we're going to make cupcakes. Which day do you want to make cupcakes? Which day do you want to play the cloud game? Which day do you want to color with chalk on the driveway? Which day do you want to give a speech of something that you learned? Those kinds of things. Give them options. You have expectations. In the situation with the Lincoln, some of the choices were memorize the Gettysburg Address and pretend you are Lincoln. That was one. Another bulk of the assignment was let's look at political cartoons because no one wants to hear memorize Lincoln's beliefs in the 1860 election. No one wants to hear it. No one wants to memorize it. And no one wants to click submit to Google Classroom on that. So, what can you do? Look at cartoons, draw a cartoon, give some options on creativity because not everyone, most learners, how do I say that politely? Not everyone. Most learners do not just learn with one modality. So, you could bake something that they may have eaten during the Civil War. Um, There's tons of options. You just have to really, really, really reach deep in your mind, because watching a video, it, it doesn't really carry the weight it did 2 weeks ago.
I would imagine.
They're like, yeah, forget it. No.
um, so we were talking also before this, and you said something about what you're learning in graduate school that you wanted to talk about as it applies to this.
I think it was learning modalities and
Okay.
just differentiated instruction, and how can you speak other people's language. The word I have recently learned is lexicon, Lexicon, and that refers to a distinct language. Everyone has one. So, we've all heard of like the five love languages I think it's by Chapman, or, there's tons of books out on how to speak other people's language and how to connect with people using language, which isn't necessarily um, a dialect or a specific nationality based language. It's your internal language and what motivates you. So using that information, really thinking about, how can I connect, how can I translate this to this second grader who wants to have recess every 20 minutes? How can I communicate to him that we have a book report and it has to be done? How can I communicate to him that we have to work on making change from money? Well, we could sit here with this worksheet that's uploaded to Google Classroom and we could do it, or we could take a handful of change and start counting it back, or we could pretend we're buying things in the house. I mean, that's where you have to get really creative, is using individual lexicon to relate to each student, whether you're a teacher in the classroom, whether you're a business person and you're relating to clients, whether you're a graduate student and you're trying to reach your professor. This is just a fact of life and communication.
So, are there any other questions that I should have asked but didn't?
I think that people need to give themselves permission to take a break from it. That's what I think. I think that whether you have a child who has special needs, or you have, um, a 20-year-old who's sick and tired of not being in their dorm and they would rather be on campus than in your living room, I think you just have to give yourself a free pass to call it a day if that's what needs to happen, because you just can't do everything. You can't suddenly become an educator when you're trying to get your own work done. I think that a lot of parents are struggling with that. They have responsibilities to their employer if they're still employed, and I think then they're faced with these demands of teachers. And I think the teachers have been good about it, but I just think people need to give themselves a free pass, that whenever the situation arises and it becomes overwhelming or inundating, it's time to stop for a while and go outside and just enjoy the day. Most of these days have been beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Which I'm very, very honestly, I had a conversation with one of my friends about this the other night, but we were talking about how we're so glad that quarantine happened when it was April. Because
Right.
like if this had happened in January or like even like February, it would have been a
Horrific.
different
Yeah.
miserable story.
Yeah.
But
If you
yeah.
can find the joy in the ordinary, just walking down the street or seeing a little slug on the sidewalk, or, I know there's been this really large moon lately, do something different. Somebody said, even put like a tent up in your backyard or a tent up in your living room and read inside of that. Just change it up. Just keep changing it up. And those perfectionism mentalities cannot last in this. I don't think that they're meant to.
I mean, I think most parents know that this is not the time to be the perfect parent, you know.
I know, but some people struggle with that. So
Yeah, that's true.
some
Yeah, right.
some kids struggle with it too. They don't like the open-endedness. They don't like the lack of structure. They don't like the unpredictability, you know?
Yeah, it's definitely not for everyone.
No, but
I
it's
know,
but
yeah.
mandated for everyone.
Yeah, it's there, you don't have a choice anymore. Yeah.
No, you can't. You can barely go out and buy toilet paper.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't have any more questions. Thank you so much for letting me interview you. I think this was really insightful.
Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Mom. This podcast is hosted and produced by Catherine Blanner with the help of Jason Hinglin Lauderdale. If you liked this podcast, leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts, follow us on Spotify, and share it with your friends. If you want to keep up with us, you can follow eSpecial Needs on social media. On Facebook, we're just eSpecial Needs, on Instagram at eSpecial_needs, and Twitter at eSpecial Needs. Thank you again for listening, and don't forget, you're doing great things.